So, Devotee from Sri Prabhupada's condensed biography was normally full biography is 6 volumes. This is just a abridged version. And that's just a final basis. So, this one is yes, I was talking about look at this one. So Prabhupada just convinced Mahaprabhu to give him a passage in one of our steamships to America. And he was just preparing to go. He had only a suitcase, an umbrella, and a supply of dry cereal. He didn't know what he would find to eat in America, perhaps there would be only meat. Perhaps so he was prepared to live on boiled potatoes and the cereal which he carried with him. His main baggage, several trunks of his books, his well-handled separately various India with cargo, 203-volume sets. He very thought of escape from conference. When the day came for him to leave, he leaved that conference. He was making a momentous break with his previous life, and he was old. He was going to an unknown and probably unwelcoming country. To be pure and unknown in India was one thing. Even in these Kali Yuga days, when India's leaders were rejecting India's culture and imitating the West, it was still the remains of the Vedic civilization. He had been able to see the nearest ministers simply by showing up at their doors and waiting. Sannyasi or renunciant was respected. Srimad Bhagavatam was respected. In America, however, it would be different. He would be no one, a foreigner, and there was no traditional sadhus, no temples, no free ashrams. But when he thought of the books that he was bringing, transcendental knowledge in English, he became confident. When he met someone in America, he would give him a flyer, Srimad Bhagavatam, India's message of peace and goodwill. Prabhupada ki jai. When this appeared to Lord Caitanya, you see that I was carrying that message. Lord Caitanya appeared 500 years ago, said that the whole range would be prepared in every town and village. And Prabhupada was on to bring that. Raghunath, is this the volume?
No, it's maybe it's a tablet.
You got it up in the book?
Yes.
Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta
Bhaktavrinda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda.
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 13, text 5. Jaya Sri Chaitanya Chandrera Bhakta Chandragana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana. Jaya Shri Chaitanya Chandrera Bhakta Chandragana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana. Jaya Shri Chaitanya Chandrera Bhakta Chandragana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana. Anyone like to chant it? If you've got a problem with it, I can use this. Oh, you got it?
Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana.
Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana.
Sabara Prana Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana.
Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana.
Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana.
Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana.
Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana.
Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana. Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana. Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana. Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana.
Ladies,
Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana. Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana. Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana. Jai Shri Chaitanya Chandra Bhakta Chandra Gana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana. Sabara Prema Jyotsnaya Ujjvala Tribhuvana.
Jaya, all glories, Sri Chaitanya, of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chandrera, who is as bright as the moon, Bhakta, devotees, Chandragana, other moons, Sabara, of all of them, Prema Jyotsnaya, by the full light of love of Godhead, Ujjvala, bright, Tribhuvana, all the three worlds. Translation: all glories to the moons who are devotees of the principal moon, Lord Chaitanya Chandra, Their bright moonshine illuminates the entire universe. Please repeat. All glories to the moons, who are devotees of the principal moon, Lord Chaitanya Chandra. Their bright moonshine illuminates the entire universe. Srila Prabhupada's purport. In this verse, we find the moon described as Chandragana, which is plural in number. This indicates that there are many moons. In Bhagavad Gita 10:21, the Lord says, Nakshatranam aham shashi. Among the stars, I am the moon. Like we have Mayapur Shashi, the moon of Mayapur, here in the altar. All the stars are like the moon. Western astronomers consider the stars to be suns, but Vedic astronomers following the Vedic scriptures consider them moons. The sun has the ability to shine powerfully, and the moons reflect the sunshine and therefore look brilliant. In the Caitanya Charitamrita, Krishna is described to be like the sun. The Supreme Powerful is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, or Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his devotees are also bright and illuminating because they reflect the Supreme Sun. The Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 22:31 states, Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andakara Yahan Krishna Tan Nahi Mayara Adhikara. Krishna is bright like the sun. As soon as the sun appears, there is no question of darkness or nescience. Similarly, the present verse also describes that by the illumination of all the moons, brightened by the reflection of the Krishna sun, or by the grace of all the devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the entire world will be illuminated despite the darkness of Kali Yuga. Only the devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can dissipate the darkness of Kali Yuga, the ignorance of the population of this age. No one else can do so. We therefore wish that all the devotees of the Krishna consciousness movement may reflect the Supreme Sun and thus dissipate the darkness of the entire world. Om Ganatamarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yana Tasman Shigurave Namaha Vakam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shigirim Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All glories to the moons who are devotees of the principal moon, Lord Chaitanya Chandra. Their bright moonshine illuminates, not eliminates, the entire universe. Eliminates the darkness of the universe. It's mentioned that in this age of Kali Yuga, so just like we have 4 seasons, we have winter, spring, summer, autumn. Also universally, the Vedic understanding is cyclical. Universally, there are seasons, and particular season universally, which we're in just now, is called Kali Yuga, or the winter age. So in winter time, things get dark. So just like traditionally, around the shortest day of the year, they have certain festivals in different cultures in the Christian world, and they have Christmas Day, and it's to give the people a little bit of hope in the middle of winter. And traditionally, in the kind of pagan, they would have, would that be Yuletide or the Feast of Stephen? I'm not sure what that is, but generally in the dead of winter, they have some kind of festival to brighten things up. So in Kali Yuga, then the Lord appears in every yuga, actually. Yada hi dharma sha glanir bhavati bharata abhutanam dharma sha tadat manam shajam yaham. Whenever and wherever there's decline in religious practice, dharma, yada hi dharma sha, at that time I descend, I invent myself. So this, at that time I descend. Descend means avatar. It's nothing to do with the little thing on your computer Sometimes they have something in the computers that like a little character called an avatar. The actual real avatar means one who descends, and that descend refers to one who comes from the eternal world, the eternal spiritual world, descends to the material world. And the purpose is try to bring some truth and some illumination into the darkness. So in Kali Yuga, because people are bewildered by what is right, people talk about truth, but if we mention what is truth, then people quite often they want to shy from that, because facing the truth means facing the fact that we're in an illusion, we're in a bewildered state, and we like to remain comfortable in illusion. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came, he's known as Tri Yuga. And we think, well, why Tri Yuga, 3 ages? Because I thought we just said that he appears in every age. But he does, but he appears as a devotee. This is Chana avatar. So Chana, we're not referring to Chana Dal, by the way. Chana means covered. So when Krishna appears in the Kali Yuga, he appears as a devotee. So we can see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, scheduled incarnations, not that someone else can just promote themselves to be an avatar, or promote themselves to be an incarnation. It's we can't do it like that. There was a very funny story in Krishna book where Pondarika was claiming to be Krishna. He was claiming to be Vishnu, and he was challenging the real Krishna for a fight. And when Krishna and the Pandavas arrived on the scene to see this, it's Pondarika, isn't it? You seen he had 2 false arms, and he didn't even have the real arms, obviously, didn't even have a real 4-armed form, because Vishnu is seen to be having 4 arms. And Prabhupada mentions in the Krishna book there that the Pandavas were laughing, I think he said they were laughing very hard. No, they were laughing for a very long time. So they could see, this man may have managed to fool a few unsuspecting followers into thinking that he was somehow or another a manifestation of Vishnu. But when Krishna and his devotees, Pandavas, seen him, they didn't even take offense. They just thought it was a total joke. So, of course, it didn't end well for Pondarika. But sometimes we see this. I remember one devotee, Pushkar, giving a class when we used to stay down in Caitanya College. And he was saying that in India, there's a different incarnation comes off the incarnation conveyor belt every week. So someone declares themselves to be an incarnation of God, but if they're not mentioned in Shastra, in the Vedic literature, then they're to be rejected. So although Lord Chaitanya isn't mentioned in the scheduled incarnation chapter in the first canto, he is mentioned later on as Twisha Krishna, which means he's Krishna, but he's a white. He's not. He's light colored. He's not dark. Krishna is dark colored. So in Kali Yuga, it is foretold, and in the Atharva Veda, we found that many millennia ago, Pippalaya was asking, or was it Pippalad? One of Lord Brahma's sons was asking Brahma, how will the people in Kali Yuga be benefited? It's a dark age, people are short-lived, their memories are short, their tempers are short, everything's short. They're bewildered, they don't know what is true, what is illusion. And they said that the Supreme Lord himself will appear in the garb of a devotee, therefore Chana avatar, to teach the chanting of his own holy names, and he will teach devotional service. So Prabhupada says that when Krishna came 5,000 years ago, then he says, Sarvadamam parityaja mamekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha ishami masuchaha. Abandon all varieties of dharma. So there are many different types of dharma, many of which are called kaitava dharma, or materially motivated religious processes. Krishna says, abandon all that and just surrender to me directly, and I'll take care of any kind of debt you have in this material world. I'll protect you from any kind of sinful reaction. Sinful reaction basically means karmic debt. And he says, do not fear. But Prabhupada comments on this. He says, so some people think, who is this Krishna to tell me to surrender? Why shall I surrender? So he understands that in Kali Yuga, people are very much confused. So therefore, he doesn't come and demand surrender in Kali Yuga. He just comes himself to show how to chant. He makes it very easy. We just chant. Say Hari Nama Mantra Lao to me Magi. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says just the Inichi Aushadi Maya Nasi Baru Lagi, the medicine for the affliction, the affliction of the jaundice of avidya. It's considered that avidya or ignorance is like a jaundice condition. And so just like when one is jaundiced, anything which is sweet tastes very bitter and you don't want to taste it, but by taking it, then your natural taste reawakens. So similarly, when we're in ignorance, then knowledge is a cure for ignorance. If one doesn't know something and someone tells you something, then generally in Vedic circles of education, whether it be education for academics or arts or spiritual education, then the student or the disciple presents himself as being one who doesn't know and who is grateful for the knowledge which is passed on to them. And that person who's passing on that knowledge is guru. It may be your dance guru or your sitar guru, but ultimately the real guru is the spiritual master, the spiritual guru. And as there are bogus representations of the Supreme Lord, then there are also bogus gurus, and people get confused by that because they learn the Vedic rhetoric and they can quote so much and they can talk very nicely and present themselves in a very nice pose, but you have to actually look and see it as a character, one of sadhu, of a holy person. Sometimes people present themselves as that. But Srila Prabhupada, he mentions that just because there are just because there's counterfeit currency, it doesn't mean to say that we give up the real currency. So if you go down to Tesco today and then your change, you give them a £20 note and then they give you a counterfeit tenner, and you come back and you realise, and then you go back to the shop and they won't exchange it because they think, oh, you could have got that from anywhere. So you think, that's it. I'm fed up with money. I'm not going to use it any longer. I've been ripped off before. That's twice this happened this week. Then it wouldn't be very practical. That's called cutting your nose off to spite your face. If you don't like your face and you think, don't like my nose, I'm going to cut it off, then it gets worse. The situation gets worse. So so similarly, we may have had negative spiritual experiences, or we may have experienced Kaitava Dharma or materially motivated Dharma or religious principles, but that doesn't mean to say that there's not the unmotivated, the pure. So this is what Lord Caitanya is bringing. Cheto Darpanam Arjunam Bhava Mahadevagni Nirvapanam Shri Kairava Chandrika Vitarnam Vijavada Jivanam Anandam Vidivardnam Patipadam Purnamita Swadnam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years. So this Shri Krishna Sankirtan is simply the chanting of the Maha mantra. So there are many different mantras one can chant, just like in the next verse we're hearing, thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. So one can chant any name of God, whatever you know the name of the Supreme to be. But some, but it's indicated that although there are different names describing the different qualities, characteristics of the Supreme, then the Hare Krishna mantra is considered to be the Maha mantra, or the great mantra of deliverance. Interesting little story. We were once doing an 8-hour kirtan in a community up north of Scotland called Findhorn. No, it wasn't. Was it Findhorn? Yeah, Findhorn Foundation, that's right. And because the people weren't accustomed to chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, then we thought, okay, we'll just chant some simple mantras to begin with, like Om, Hari Om, Om Namo Narayan, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Nitai Gauranga, etc. And then once people get accustomed to it, then after a few hours brought in the Maha Mantra. And at that point, it just really lifted. And there was one lady there, she was a yoga teacher, and there was just tears streaming from her eyes. And I went over to see, once we'd finished the kirtan, it was 8 hours. And it's interesting though, because if you chant for an hour with kirtan, you just feel like you're getting started. And if you chant for like 2 hours or 4 hours or 8 hours, you feel like you're just getting off the ground. It doesn't feel like, oh, when's this going to finish? Even if you go to see your best band, after a while your ears will start ringing. It's like, oh, I need a break. But the nature of the spiritual pleasure is Atma Rama. We become self-satisfied. Atma means the self, and Rama means pleasure. We can take pleasure in the self. We don't require some external source of pleasure, which means we can be happy wherever we are in any circumstance. So I asked this lady, are you okay? And she says, yeah, actually I did. She kind of gathered herself. She said, I did a yoga course with some group, and they had told her that the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the Maha Mantra or the Great Mantra. She said it didn't have any impact on me then. They said, but when we chanted it now, then I can see what they mean by it being the Great Mantra. So the Maha Mantra, we don't just chant Hare Krishna Mantra because, that's our motto or that's our battle cry or whatever. It's not just we just like that and we're too stupid to learn anything else. Our brain only goes as far as learning 3 words, Hare Krishna and Rama. But actually we do it because it contains all the other benefits which can be obtained by chanting the other mantras. So when so the knowledge which is sometimes given as or concocted knowledge which is not coming directly from the authorized source is considered in Kali Yuga to be like the light of a firefly. Anyone ever seen a firefly at night? Yeah, you think it's obviously quite extraordinary, it's quite attractive, but you're not exactly going to see much illumined round about it. You maybe just see the fly itself. So the knowledge coming from material knowledge in the darkness of this winter age is like the knowledge of a firefly. It doesn't actually illuminate the self, it doesn't illuminate the mind. And when we talk about light, we talk about the light of knowledge, but also one feels light. When one is in ignorance, we feel heavy, we feel dark, but when there's knowledge there, even materially speaking, if you're trying to do something and you don't have the knowledge, the expertise, someone comes along and says, oh, you just do that. And then you do that and you go, oh, that's great, thanks for that tip. The internet's full of tips how to make life a bit easier. That's because life is a bit of a challenge. And the knowledge coming from the Supreme Lord is knowledge pertaining to ourself. Knowledge pertaining to everything material is really, it can be helpful and we can make some material advancement, etc. But the real advancement we need to make is advancement to understand ourselves better, understand our true nature. We have our conditioned nature, which we have assimilated since our birth. And even before that, we're carrying on some nature from before this lifetime. But this Vedic knowledge and the chanting of the Maha Mantra, which illuminates that Vedic knowledge, then that is pertaining to ourself, to our original unconditioned self.
So nowadays, people are. There's a verse in Bhagavad Gita: Yad yad acharati shrestas tatad eva trojanhas yat parmanam kuriti lokas tad anuvartate. That whatever action a great person performs, common people follow in the footsteps, and whatever standards they set by exemplary acts, the whole world pursues. So we see people are looking for role models, and they find them in pop stars, movie stars, sports stars. But all these stars, they're just giving, like, at night when the sky is open, there's a little bit of twinkling light comes from the star. But when the moon is there, especially if it's a full moon tonight, if the sky is clear and the full moon will be out, you can just see, you don't even need any street lighting. So this is the difference. The knowledge or the attractiveness of these stars, it's so temporary and flickering. And they say that even you're looking at a star just now, it might not even be there. The light coming from it may be from such a long time ago that it's not even there. But the moon, that is something which is dependable, and it comes regularly. We know that every couple of weeks there's going to be a full moon, and the waxing and the waning is going on. Of course, in Scotland, sometimes you don't see it because of the clouds. Therefore, they invented street lighting. But this verse here is the reflection of the sunlight from the moon, or the reflection of the moonlight coming from the sun. Then that is illuminating. And the analogy here is that Krishna is the sun and the moon is the devotee. So it's just, the moon is not filtering out that, it's just the moon is reflecting simply what light has come. So similarly, the devotees, the true devotees, are reflecting Krishna's knowledge, Krishna's message, and they're not interpreting it and putting their own spin on it. They may speak in their own words, they may speak in a different language, but the message is the same. And therefore, when one meets the pure devotee of the Lord, then is considered Shakshad Hari Tuena Samasta Shastriya. Shakshad Hari means, Shakshad means directly, and Hari means the Supreme Lord. So when one meets a devotee of the Lord, it's considered to be as good as meeting the Lord. Just as much as if you meet the ambassador of a country, it's just as much as meeting the that person's a representative of the head of that country. And these moons, these devotee moons, are considered to be illuminating because they reflect that sun. And so even in, say, in Scotland, perhaps you've got like the moon's at its lowest point, and then it's very cloudy, and there's a power cut. It can be very dark. But then as soon as sunlight comes, as soon as the sun comes up, then the darkness is dissipated. So similarly, this age of Kali, age of quarrel and hypocrisy, it's not difficult to find faults. They say that Kali dosha nidhi rajan, that in the age of Kali, doshas, faults are easy to find. It's not difficult to find. Sometimes people think they're very intelligent because they're a very good critic. It's like, oh, I'm more intelligent than everybody because I can see everybody's faults. But actually, the real good quality of a person is, regardless of someone's faults, what good can we see in them? If you see the faults in people, then you end up with the faults. If you see the good, you cultivate the good in yourself. So we try to see the good. If we see the good in others, then we can cultivate that good in them. But if we see just the faults, then that means we just put them in that box, and we put ourselves in that box as well. And that is our Jesi Sangha Vesiranga, by our association. That's what we become. We give that example often. If Padar puts his brand new white dhoti in the laundry, and Pit puts that red jumper in with it, then it's probably not going to be white any longer. So that's by association. So the association we keep, that means not just the people we hang around with, but also how we associate, what kind of association we cultivate. That's up to us. how we see people. That's how we're associating. And how we view the world is the kind of world we live in. If we don't like the world we live in, then we can change it. And we're the only person that can do that. We can't wait for the rest of the world to change. I remember once I was on the street distributing books, and somebody was quite rude to me, and I snapped back some kind of smart comment. And my devotee friend came along to me and says, well done. He says, perhaps you may have like, how was it he put it? He was basically giving me a subtle chastisement for being defensive. He said, is that one person that you may have converted to your way of thinking out of all the millions and billions that are in the world? He says, you've only got like another 5.9 billion to go. And I realized actually, yeah, the better thing is change yourself and then you change the world. And yeah, if we don't like the world that we live in, then we can change it. And the way to do that is to change our own outlook, change our own values. And sometimes it's not even changing, it's just finding them, which are already in there. Finding that good which is in you, finding that good which is in others, and cultivating that. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was also asking us to try to see the good in others. Even when Haridas Thakur, he was being punished by, at that time, it was some Muslim magistrate was governing in that area. He was being punished in different marketplaces. And the soldiers who had been tasked with punishing publicly, they were beating him publicly. And they were becoming distressed because he was simply just chanting and he wasn't experiencing any pain. Of course, Haridas Thakur is a very elevated and advanced devotee, so we don't encourage people to go and stand in front of the motorway and chant and see if you get hit by a car if it doesn't hurt. You know, we've got to be practical. But still, even though he was being punished, then they were becoming distressed because the one who were punishing him, because he wouldn't die. And so he says, my dear sirs, what's wrong with you? And he says, oh, we've been told to basically beat you to death. And we're going to get in trouble because you won't die. And he said, oh, I didn't know. Sorry to be such an inconvenience. Just throw me in the Ganges. So they threw him in the Ganges and he floated down and then he came out, of course. But he never actually experienced any pain. Now, that's a very, very high level of devotional attachment and surrender and dependency on the Lord. And it's also that kind of reciprocation the Lord gives to that very high devotee is such that whenever the devotees surrender to the Lord, then simply they're always blissful. Anandam buddhivardhanam. But to begin with, it's not so blissful because we have to go through a process of narta nivritti, which means giving up unwanted things. And the problem with that is that we don't even realize they're unwanted. A lot of the things which we want in the world, they're not good for us. It's just like a child. Sometimes the parents are trying to protect the child. I want this, I want that. No, it's not good for you. I want to drink that bleach. No, you can't have that. Put it up high. Then the kid tries to get to whatever they're not allowed to get to. They want to try it out. I remember also as a kid, I didn't like smoking. I've got asthma and it used to affect me. And I used to complain to my parents all the time. But then when I was old enough, then I started smoking as well, even though it wasn't good for me. So that's the kind of nature that by the example people set, then even sometimes you don't like it, but still we end up following it because we don't see a better example. So therefore, it's natural that we look for good examples. And therefore, and sometimes we don't even know what is a good example. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining what is the characteristics of a devotee. And one of the first things is we learn to tolerate. So in Kali Yuga, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, as we were saying, is people are very intolerant for the slight, perhaps says over a trifle, they have a fight. I don't mean like pudding. Sometimes that can be there as well. But over the slightest thing, then people go to war. And we're seeing this is happening practically. Somebody gets an idea. It's actually very childish, this false sense of proprietorship. Sometimes children may fight over a toy, like one child's playing with a toy, and then they stop playing with it and they go to play with something else, and another child comes along and they start playing with it, and even though this first one is not playing with it, they say, that's mine, don't touch. They don't even need any education, right? That aham mameti, everything is mine. Whatever, I am the Lord of what I survey. So we just want to make everything ours. And because of this false sense of proprietorship, it's like the world is here before we come along. It'll be here when we've gone. And in the middle, we come along and say, that's mine, you move over, I want that. So it happens in children, it happens with adults. Children fight with their fists or their nails or whatever, pulling hair. And then adults fight with guns and bombs. But it's not actually advanced any. So therefore, this false sense of proprietorship is the cause of so much disturbance in this world, and this is going on time immemorial until people understand that there is a real proprietor and it's not us. So whether it's capitalism, communism, or whatever, then these isms are not going to solve it until we recognize that there is a supreme proprietor and we're only simply here for a little while, and that our duty is to try to utilize whatever's in this world for the service of the supreme proprietor. So in this way, this is the real ego, not the false ego. So the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which is what Lord Caitanya brought, and he spoke 8 verses, the Shikshastakam. So we'll be going into the Shikshastakam on Sunday. We have a longer festival on Sunday from 2 to 7. There will be 5 hours kirtan here in the temple, and there'll be talks and children's activities and bhajans, devotional songs in the Garanga Hall. And of course, there'll be a feast. So we encourage everyone to come and take part in that and engage in a bit of Cheto Darpana Marjanam. So the mirror, if we look in the mirror and the mirror is very dirty, if it's greasy, or if it's dusty, so dirty sometimes we can't see the true reflection, but when we clean it in the proper way and continue to clean it, then we can see the true reflection. So this chanting is actually the process of cleansing the mirror of the mind so that we can see our real self. When we try to see ourselves, we see through our conditioned mind, and that gives us a false ego or a false conception of who we are. But when the mind is cleaned, then we see who we really are. We see that actually I'm nothing to do with this body. This body is just an illusory representation of the material elements. Even scientifically, if you were to get a microscope and you look through the body, you see it's just a composition of many, many cells put together. And it's animated by the consciousness within the body. That is us. That is our identity. But because we identify with the body, or maybe a little bit more advanced, we identify with the mind. But both the body and the mind are changing. We change our body gradually. The cells are, as we're eating, the process of renewing the cells is going on. So all the cells which were in our body 7 years ago have been renewed. We don't have that same body. We may have had a little body this size at one time, and we look back and think, oh, what happened to that body? What happened to that cute little thing? I grew up to be something different. But we look back and we think, well, I remember that photograph of when I was 5 years old. I remember it being taken. So it's not that somebody else was present there. We were present there. So the body's changing and the mind is changing. We make up our mind. We change our mind. And who is the we that is making that mind up? Who is the we who is changing it? We use our intelligence sometimes we don't. And we think, oh, I knew better than that. We don't act according to our intelligence sometimes. So we have intelligence, we have a mind, we have a body, but who are we? So this is what this mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is that chant Hare Krishna, reawakening your original consciousness and be free from the illusions of this bodily conception of life. And it's quite a simple process. Prabhupada, he condensed it into 3 things: chanting, dancing, and feasting. But on days like this, sometimes it's chanting, dancing, and fasting. So we'll just stop there. If anyone's got any questions or comments or corrections. So, although today is a fast day, then for those who are not like residential devotees, they don't have to fast. Of course, we're not going to ask the volunteers to fast. And anyone who finds it too difficult to fast, better that you don't go around with a crazy mind all day just meditating on food. But if you can fast at least at lunchtime, or there's different levels of fasting as well. Sometimes you can just take water, or you can just take fruit. But when we observe some kind of abstinence and we focus more on our Krishna consciousness in the day, then we get the benefits of the particular appearance day.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class. Small question, Prabhu. So we kind of understand we are not the proprietors, and it doesn't sink in very clearly also, or sometimes this tendency is very strong. And there is a supreme proprietor. Supreme proprietor knows that I am the supreme proprietor. Why doesn't the supreme proprietor make it easy and just come down or tell everyone, look, I am the supreme proprietor and everything is sorted, perhaps?
He does. He did. Aham sarvasya prabhavo bhoktaram jagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram sarva suridam sarvabhutanam gyapramam shantam richati. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna did explain that bhoktaram jagatapasam, I am the enjoyer of all sacrifices, sarvaloka maheshwaram, I am the proprietor of all spiritual material worlds. But we're but we're thinking no. And even for those who maybe not have heard that, then the question is, well, why doesn't he just come and personally tell us all? What would be so difficult to do that? Because we don't want it. We prefer to stay in our illusion. If we really want it, if we really want to see, then we have to start acting that Krishna is supreme proprietor. Because what if Krishna comes and he walks in today? Would we even recognize him? We say, oh yeah, he'd be blue, he'd walk in and we'd see him. But even great devotees have met Krishna and didn't realize it until he left. There was that time when, was it Madhavendra Puri was in Vrindavan? Was it Madhavendra Puri? And he was fasting, and one little cowherd boy came along with some milk and said, my mother sent me along with this milk for you because in our village we don't fast. We've just milked the cow, and my mother says to get some of the milk to you. And she said, oh great, thank you very much. So then he went away and he realized actually that was just Krishna. So I guess as long as we want to consider ourselves to be the proprietor, as long as we remain attached to the material world, and we can consider theoretically that we're not proprietor, that we come into the world with nothing, we go out with nothing, but in between we assume proprietorship over things. But one who accepts that there is a supreme proprietor, then they learn to utilize everything in the service of that proprietor. Just like if you work in a bank and then a lot of money is passing through your hands every day, but if you think, well, there's so much money here, let me just take some home, I could do with a bit extra, then you become a thief. As long as you're just utilizing it in the service of the bank, then you're not implicated in anything. So similarly, everything belongs to Krishna. If you use it in his service, there's no implication of karma. It's called akarma or naish karma, which means action without any reaction. But as soon as we use it for ourselves, if you use it for a good purpose, then you may get some good material reaction, but you still have to take birth again to get that material reaction. If you use it for vikarma, which is forbidden activities or activities which are going to cause harm to you or others, then you get a negative reaction. And if you use the facilities which you have for ugra karma, which means really nasty, horrible, unbeneficial works meant for the destruction of the world, then you get an ugra karma reaction, you get a very bad reaction. So people may believe or not believe that the law of karma is there, but intrinsically people know that. Sometimes things happen and say, oh, what did I do to deserve this? Sometimes they ask honestly, or sometimes they say it in such a way which is defying that they deserve to be suffering in any way. Oh, why am I suffering? But if we simply even make an experiment to say, okay, well, if everything belongs to Krishna, let me use everything in Krishna's service and see what happens, and soon you'll find that even the things you're attached to, they don't bring you down any longer. The problem with being attached to material things is we're dependent on those things for our happiness, and when they're not there, then that source of happiness can't be there. If we're depending on a person, or we're depending on wealth, or we're depending on certain facilities, then we're limiting our pleasure, we're limiting our freedom. We're actually then becoming the servants of those objects. So the living entity is marginal by nature. There's the Paraprakriti, the supreme divine energy, which is eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge, and then there's the material energy, which is the opposite in nature. It's not eternal, the manifestations are temporary, even these planets are temporary. What to speak of our body, it's just a flash in time. But if we associate with the eternal through service, through engaging our mind in activities which are connected with the eternal, then we'll begin to realize that eternal nature. If we associate with the temporary and put the importance on the temporary, then that's the choice we have. So Krishna, he won't interfere, and answer your question, he won't interfere with our free will. He basically gives us the choice. Say that it's up to you. You do what you want to do. You can come back to me. We have an eternal party going on in the spiritual world, and it's blissful. But if you want to be a mini controller of the material world, then you can stay here. And in Bhagavad Gita, we find all the information whereby you can understand, yeah, this is material, this is spiritual. And this is the whole conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna is putting forward so many questions, and Krishna is answering them. But ultimately, at the end, he says, so now it's up to you. What do you want to do? He doesn't force him. And that's the same for all of us. Bhagavad Gita applies to all of us. Okay. Anyone get any other questions or points?
I had two questions. First one was, so the Cheto Darpana Marjanam, that principle, in some places I've read it relates to the fog of the mind. In some places it talks about the cleansing of the heart. Mm-hmm. So what's the difference between the two, and what does that actually entail? Is it the mind or the heart?
Well, it's funny because, very good question, thanks, it's the same thing. Because we think, because the head is the center of all the senses, mostly we're seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing, we think that we're in the head. And to some degree, that's when we're on the mental platform, you are in your head. But it's mentioned that the mind is situated within the heart region as well. So purifying the mind, purifying the heart, it's the same thing. The soul doesn't need purifying because the soul is already pure. We're simply removing the coverings from around. Just like if you find a gold nugget and it's covered in, encrusted in some dirt, then the gold doesn't need purified. They just remove the dirt and then you see the gold is there. So the self, the Atma, is already pure, and it's covered by the subtle and gross material coverings which we identify with. So by the chanting process, then we remove those subtle coverings, or we purify those, and then we begin to see who we really are. We realize that Prabhupada explains in Caitanya Charitamrita that when we're in this material frame of mind and we're engaging in karmic activities, then it's called Nitya Bada, eternally conditioned. So the word nitya is like perpetual. So it's perpetual is only perpetual as long as you keep perpetuating it. But when we become free from that, then we'll realize that we're nitya siddha, and we were never nitya baddha. We were always eternally perfect. So the nitya baddha is not that we were always conditioned and we come into existence conditioned. Prabhupada explains that it's actually it's only because it's in time immemorial, and we act according to that conditioned nature as if it's us. We so much identify with the conditioned nature that we become offended if someone disagrees with us or doesn't understand or accept our point of view, or someone slights us in some way. It's because we identify. But in the Shikshastakam, we see Trinadapi Sanechana, the devotee is humble, has nothing to defend. So when we become offended, that means that we've still got some lesson humility to learn. And that's why it's something we have to meditate on every day, and that's why we chant it every day at the morning program, is to remind us this is where we should be aiming to. Every day we've got challenges to become tolerant, to become humble, to respect others. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Iskon Guruvanda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki, Shri Kodnitai Mahaprasasha ki, Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki, Shri Gaura Purnima Maha Mahotsava ki, Thai Gaur Premanande.